Hello there and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Ask the Trainer. And we have a special edition for you today. I'm delighted to be joined by a whole list of talented people who are joining us today. I'll do the introductions properly in a minute, but as regular viewers will know, we like to give a few minutes for people just to turn up at the top of the hour. But spoiler alert, we're delighted to welcome Katie Hinsen and Sarah Gibson and Jamie Stefani and also Anthony Bari Jr. as well as Jonas is hanging out on the questions too. And the plan is on this session to investigate the world of post-production in terms of getting hired and the related topics to that. So we'll talk more about that very, very soon. So, but just before we start, then, oh, hi from Munich, from Bernd. And I was just going to say, please put your questions in the questions area, but a lot of you know the score already. Thanks, Kent. It was all looking and sounding great. Thanks, Jonathan. Hi from Nottingham. We were just talking earlier on about how rainy it was in our various locations, so I'm sure it's the same in Nottingham, from my experience anyway. And hi there, Anders. So regular viewers will know also that one of the ways you got here was you went to the events page on the Maxon.net site. So it's just here's a little reminder of all the things that are happening very soon, as well as our usual shows. Don't miss VFX and Chill with Hashi and Seth on Friday. And also our very own Dr. Sassy is running a Redshift and Vectorworks session on next Tuesday for the Vectorworks Design Summit. And he's running through an hour of making things inside Vectorworks with using Redshift with that super fast rendering capability that's been recently added. And then all through next month, every Monday in November, we have a new series of demystifying webinars where we're looking at managing color. And we've got 5 sessions. We're lucky enough to have 5 Mondays in November. So on those 5 sessions, we are going to be looking at all sorts of things from interpreting color on your various screens that you have to deliver on, including and then how you would set that up for a variety of different workflows. And ACES is a very popular workflow in our industry, so we'll be talking about that, the Academy's protocol for making sure you can match color as in many ways as possible. And we've got some technical as well as creative ways of doing that. And also we'll be looking at the professional monitoring equipment and how what decisions you need to make in order to then make your color look as accurate as possible. So please turn up for those. And also, if you have missed any of the previous recordings, or in fact, you're watching this recording or to see the other ones, don't forget to go to the YouTube channel, the Maxon Training Team, and we'll upload the recording of what we're doing right now in a couple of hours when it's finished processing. So great, okay, that's the usual gump out the way. Just a few people are saying hi, Hannah, hi Drake, hi Jonathan, thanks for joining us. So what we'll do, I'll just ask everyone to just run through their background a little bit, because the whole conceit of these sessions, as you well know, is that we want to share our collective experience and leave you with something useful. And I think with the experience that we've got here joining us today, that's pretty much guaranteed. But also, if you've got any specific questions, please dial those in the comments area or the questions area, and we'll kind of bring those naturally into the conversation too, because we've got lots of things to talk about in the next 45 minutes or so. So firstly, welcome, Katie. Thank you for joining us. Rather than me making a ham-fisted way of explaining how amazing you are and your experiences, but please can I ask you to do that?
Sure, no problem. So I am the co-founder of the Blue Collar Post Collective. It's the largest non-profit for post-production in the world. But also I work at Marvel Studios. I'm the director of technology there. I'm based in Los Angeles, but I started out my career in New Zealand. I started in television. I have a degree in television broadcasting, and I worked my way through post-production from intern up to online editor, colorist. I've been an engineer. I've done a lot of different things. I kind of had a very zigzaggy career, and I moved to New York in 2010, was working as an online editor and colorist there, and getting quite senior, and got to a point where I felt that I wanted to change paths a little bit. So I moved into building and running post facilities. And so I started building and running post facilities around the world, doing from a slightly different perspective. It was really very eye-opening to be on the other side of things. I'd spent 20 years of my career on one side of the desk, and now being on the other side of the desk was really incredible to see. And I've really felt since then, I'm really into sharing a lot of the insights that I've gained, I think, from being on the other side of things, being in management and leadership and doing the hiring and seeing the way that the business works under the hood. And so, yeah, I'm actually in Los Angeles now and working at the Walt Disney Company under Marvel.
That's a amazingly rounded amount of experience. I want to talk more about this as we progress, but just quickly, how do you feel that your previous experiences all added together to cross the desk, as you say? Would you recommend that as a useful thing to do, or are there multiple routes for people?
There's many routes to anything, and I always say my experience. People ask me how I got where I am, and I can tell you that, but I'd also rather not talk too much about myself because my experience is not relevant to anybody else. Nobody else is going to have the same path as me, and I had various lucky breaks, privileges, hard knocks, and all of that sort of thing that no one else is going to be able to mirror. There's certainly insights that I gained, but I think it's really important to understand that there are as many different paths to being where you want to be in the industry as there are people. That said, one of the first pieces of advice I ever got as an intern from someone who was a television director, and I said, what advice do you have for me for being a good television director? And he said to do everyone else's job, because that way you understand what it takes to lead those people and make good decisions for them. And so, I have done a lot of different jobs. I have a very, very varied resume. And I think it does help a lot for me to understand what it takes to lead and serve. I think the higher up I've gotten in leadership, the more I've understood that leadership is actually about serving others more than anything else. The more I am in a leadership position, the more I am serving others. And that is my job. My job is to help other people do their best work. And so understanding what it takes for them, even just a little bit, I can never, I haven't done everybody's job, but I understand how those things fit together and often what it takes, and also knowing what I don't know and where to ask people, intelligent questions. It's really, really important to at least I can be humble as well about knowing what I don't know, because I've worked with those people alongside them. And the other thing is that in terms of getting a path to being in management, not everybody should be a manager. It's a whole other skill. And I think there's a misnomer that leadership, and that's part of why I got into leadership, because I got a bit sick and tired of working for people who'd kind of were in leadership because they'd just been there the longest. And management is a skill of its own. I actually took myself off to night school and studied business a little bit to be able to get into this position. But it really is its own skill, and it's not for everybody. Not everybody enjoys it. Not everybody's cut out for it or good at it. And so, it's something really important to understand that management and leadership is a very different skill set to being an operator.
Absolutely, and there's timing has a lot to do with that, and life experience, as I've found too. Thank you. Sarah, welcome. I had the privilege of meeting Sarah a few weeks ago when we both attended Camp MoGraph, and Sarah is a very talented animator and presenter. You presented for the 3D motion show for Maxon before. So welcome, Sarah. Please let us know a little bit about you.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah. I'm currently located in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a freelance animator and motion designer. My background was originally actually in graphic design. I worked for a publication for, I want to say, about 5 years, and it was kind of a dead-end job. And then while building a website, I kind of stumbled into motion design. And at the job I got after that, I was able to learn more. I was very encouraged by my friend Brian, who is now a colorist and does amazing work. And yeah, and then I managed to get a job at a studio, and I was there for years until COVID, and then I went freelance, and I've been freelance ever since, and it's been awesome. And that's a quick summary of me.
That's you've got a. We were chatting earlier on by email, and you've got a great story about one of the many threads, as Katie mentioned, about the different journeys that we all had about getting hired. But just before I ask you that,
Mhm.
what for you has been the main difference? You mentioned specifically about the COVID and then needing to work freelance. Was that just a function of the state of who you're working for, or was that more of a conscious decision that you were ready for that particular thing at this point in your life?
It was, I'll just put it this way. The CEO of the company I worked for, he had multiple companies, a good chunk of which dealt with live events. And so he had to do cuts across the board, and I got cut. That's just the basic, simplest way to put it. I freaked out for like a day, and then I, sat down, made a reel, reached out to all my contacts because luckily I have networked a lot, especially in the local St. Louis area, now everywhere, but at the time mostly with all the local studios. So I knew a lot of partners and owners of studios in the area. So I was able to be like, hey, I'm going to be going freelance. Here's my reel, so it was all fine.
That's that's a key thing, isn't it? I mean, that story that you told me, would you mind sharing that? That relates into the networking aspect.
Sure. So about a little over a year ago, I like lipsticks. I buy lipsticks randomly, and this was for a brand called Oma, UOMA, and the founder of it is actually from Nigeria, if I remember correctly. But I bought a lipstick just on a whim because I thought it looked good and it was 50% off, and so why not? And when I got it, it was just so amazingly sparkly on the tube. Like it looked like it was encrusted with diamonds, like the actual lipstick, not the outer packaging, but the lipstick itself. And I looked at that, I'm like, this would be really fun, like a fun challenge to model this in 3D. So I did. I modeled it, I recreated the textures and everything. And then after I did that, I was like, hey, why don't I animate it? Because why not? I already have the model. Let's go ahead and animate it. So then I animated it and I posted it on my Instagram and I tagged the company, just more like, wasn't really expecting anything. You're gonna have to scroll back through my
All
Instagram to
right.
find it.
Okay. That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to find in the background for it.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. The two lipsticks with the feathers go up a little bit. There it is on
Oh,
the
here we go.
right. Yeah, that
This one.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the piece I did. So I tagged them and they really liked it. They asked if they could repost it, and that sort of opened a conversation up with their head of marketing. Fast forward to this past March, they reached out to me. I didn't know what the product was for or what they wanted me for exactly. I just knew that it was a new line they were launching. And I had, I think, like 2 weeks. And it ended up being their collection for Coming to America, the new film. So then I got to do their animation for that new product line. And that all happened just out of a passion project. And this is, I wouldn't call it free work. It was just work I did for fun and for practice. And it was really, it's fun for me to experiment and try things. And I mean, I figured out how to make feathers and yeah, it was just fun. And then I ended up getting a job out of it, which was cool.
This neatly ties into the thread that Katie mentioned earlier on about different journeys and different ways that all the dots kind of join together, and how we then find ourselves in positions. And I was chatting to Tony the other day about the passion thing for me is the most important thing. And so this seems like this evolved because of your passion for doing it, and that was reflected in the work, and then people could obviously see that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So that's really great. Thank you for that.
No
We
problem.
might come back to this theme as we discuss this topic.
All
Jamie,
right.
welcome. Thank you for waiting for us. I know Jamie very well now. Jamie is head of HR at Maxon, and apart from anything else, a wonderful, wonderful person. So sorry to embarrass you, Jamie. But
Well, thank you,
can
Simon.
tell us a little about your journey here.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Sarah, that was amazing. I am in
Oh.
so awe of your creativity, and I too love lipsticks, and that was just so creative and so sparkly. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, a little bit about me. I am new to this industry. I have only been with Maxon since March of 2021. So this is a new creative journey for me, but I have been in HR as a profession my entire career. I love it. It is my creative passion. I love people. I think people are fascinating and wonderful to work with. Simon being one of them. We have worked wonderfully together for the last 7-8 months. And I love finding cool people to work with. I stole that line from a team member of mine. That's her phrase as a recruiter of ours. And that's kind of what I do. I work with really cool people, and I try and create some teams that work wonderfully together and make magic. And that's pretty much the caption of my job. And so I coach people. I help, like Katie said, do the best work they can. I remove obstacles as best I can. I take friction points and try and remove them as well. So that's kind of the job description that I have. And I try and do that in the most creative, fun way so that we all come together and have fun every day. Not always possible, but as the best that we can do, I try and do that. So that's what I do every day at Maxon. And I try and do that with Simon and all of my team members.
Jamie, have you seen a connection between your previous industries that you worked with and the post-production? Is there a thread that kind of, irrespective of industries, is there a thread that flows through in terms of perhaps getting hired either freelance or full-time?
Yeah, I've worked in many industries, from retail, manufacturing, aerospace, engineering, education. But everybody comes to work to do their best work, to do their best job. And so whatever it is, we want to we want to have a clear understanding of the expectations of to do our job, and we want to work together as a team to just see that come to pass. And so I think that's what it is. I just want to make our jobs as clear as possible to meet those expectations. And so that's really the thread that pulls it all together, is we just want to do a great job. So yes, and so whether it's a freelance or a full-time employee, we just want to know the clear expectations of how to deliver the work.
In fact, that's a very interesting and important comment, the expectations and the detail, because Tony and I were having a chat about this whole topic yesterday, and whenever Tony and I have a chat, we end up rambling about all sorts of related things for ages. But sorry, Tony, I'll let you introduce yourself. But the one thing I wanted to ask you as we do that is this very thing, because Tony wears multiple hats as a freelance. Well, tell us about yourself, Tony. Oh, we can't hear you, Tony. You got to turn on mic 17. Just what? Oh no, technical problems. Still can't hear you, I'm afraid. Tony's in Los Angeles just whilst he gets his settings put together. Keep trying, Tony. I'll fill whilst you get the settings done. But you may recognize Tony because he's done a whole bunch of sessions for us and demystifying webinars. And he is a shooter as well as a post-production artist and colorist. And he's done productions for us before where he's done everything, including taking the entire rig. It needs to get 1 mile in the other direction. The easiest thing was just to lift it up and just hike it up that hill. So Tony's been on site in many different countries and locations doing that sort of practical thing, that extra thing which you don't really see as part of the job description, but that extra kind of work that comes from the passion. But let's make this work. Let's just do anything to get to that end goal. How are you doing on the mic, Tony? Should I say that you're a post-production audio specialist at this point? Yeah. Well, tell you what, whilst you're figuring it out, Tony, I've got a question for Katie. And this might be a wide-reaching question, but I just wanted to ask your opinion. If you had advice for people to how to get hired, could I ask you the very simple question: how would you give that advice? How do people get hired? But could you bracket in your experience with the amazing blue collar post collective surveys that you do? Because I think
Sure.
we have to talk about that.
Yeah. So the surveys are open every year in October. So there's one running right now. And those surveys, yeah, so the survey runs for the month of October, and it's a snapshot of the post-production industry in the US every year. And so we get an interesting amount of data. It's all anonymous, but we get some really interesting data. We usually try and aim for a very representative subset of the industry. So we get about 2,500 people, but that we try and make sure they're distributed in a representative way. So what it does is it shows us a lot of things about the industry. It's used obviously for a lot of people to be able to look at that data and compare what they're getting paid to what other people like them are getting paid. It helps people to determine how much money to ask for. But yes, it definitely shows us, it shows us some interesting things about what the industry looks like, and what people's career paths look like as well. So, you know, one of the things that what I find is gathering the data is really interesting, but also looking at the data, there's a lot of things that interest me personally. And people have often asked me, you know, my colleagues who are also hiring ask me, like, you know, where do I find more diverse candidates for certain roles? And we do see that certain roles are, you know, have less diversity within the professionals than others. But from these surveys, we can actually see where the little pockets of diversity do lie. And so one of the things in particular, there are areas like particularly colorists. That's a really big one. It's difficult to, people find it really difficult to hire more diverse candidates as colorists. And what we find is that it's, you know, a lot of people are asking me from, say, commercials houses, you know, scripted television, those kind of, you know, places that are doing those sort of Hollywood, I suppose, level of things. You know, where do we find colorists who are women or people of color? And we can see from the survey that there are actually a lot of very experienced and qualified people who are colorists, for example, in unscripted and corporate and branded content. And so often it's a case of just understanding that that's where to find those candidates that can be really useful to people. We also see that that there's a lot more diversity at the lower end of our industry, at the entry level, and a whole lot less at the what we call professional and veteran sides. And so a lot of people are focusing a lot on encouraging a wider range of people to come into the industry. But the truth is that what we're seeing is that, you know, traditionally excluded people are actually overrepresented at that entry level in our industry. So it's not about encouraging women to get into film school. There's plenty, in fact, overrepresented. However, it's actually a case of making sure that we find a good path to promote, train, encourage these people to keep moving through the industry and hire them, just hiring those people and making an effort. I think it's really important that as hiring managers, we go out of our way to make an effort to find those candidates and look outside of what we're used to, you know, look outside some of the places that we're used to looking at and broaden our minds a little bit. And when people say to me, oh, but, you know, these people are in unscripted television, they've never done scripted television, how could they ever grade, you know, how could they ever grade my narrative feature if they've only done unscripted? I usually say, where were you before you were here? Where were you before you were doing scripted? I came from unscripted myself and moved into features. And so we've all kind of come that way, and most professionals are good at what they do. It's really irrelevant what content they're working on. So that's what we see in the surveys. We see a lot of that sort of thing. We also see, interestingly, in real-time data, real data from real people, we see the pay gaps that exist, and we're able to look at those and how they change every year. So it's very, very interesting information, and it's so important that people participate in the survey so we get a true representative data set, because it's used, as you can tell, for a lot of different things.
In case you're wondering, the surveys that we've got them up on the screen here, and I just posted the link for this page in the chat. And also you get the link inside the handout. We have the usual PDF handout as part of the webinar software. So if you click on that, you'll get the link to both the surveys and also to take the 2021 survey. And you can download last year's survey from the links in CSV or PDF format or Excel format. And I've got two questions about this, Katie. One thing I was very interested to see when I had a little look through was the fact that there was a gap in terms of pay for experience, and you could very easily see if somebody had more than 15 years experience. The trends, the curves seemed to be much more represented at the high level. But I also want, as a follow-up to that, just wanted to ask you about, it's absolutely the responsibility of the employers to make these paths possible. But if you're an individual and you haven't been able to network, and we've all been stuck behind a screen somewhere, what would be your advice to people about how to get to that next step?
Totally. As a hiring manager, I can tell you, make it easy for me, right? And that's the biggest thing that I usually say to people. I have a lot of people saying, how do I get hired in America? How do I get noticed in this area of the industry? Do what Sarah does, in fact, have an incredible Instagram. Get out. The social media is awesome for that stuff. I often use the example, and if you're listening, hi, of a guy called Twain Richardson. Now, especially within the New York industry, a lot of people have heard of him. He's a colorist. Pretty popular guy. He gets, if you're on any of the social medias of post-production, you'll know about this guy, Twain Richardson. He's very active in the industry. He's in Jamaica, and he's based in Jamaica, Jamaican guy, but people don't know that often. And what they do is they see this guy who's very active in social media, puts himself out there, gets on panels, answers people's questions when they have them. He's put himself out there as an expert. He's a colorist. He's a great colorist, so really incredible. And people think that because they're not in New York or Los Angeles or London or Sydney, that it's impossible for them to get work there without physically being there. And Twain is an example I use all the time of how to do it right. And so, I think using social media, getting out there, just putting yourself out there, you'll see that there's a lot of forums out there. Answer people's questions, put your work out there on Instagram, and become, get into, speak on panels, do these things. It makes a big difference, because what it means is for someone like me, who's a hiring manager, someone like Jamie, you're thinking, now I'm looking for a good motion designer. Who would be good? Oh, what about that chick Sarah? I saw that awesome thing. I saw her do that panel, and I saw her work, and she's awesome. Why don't we give her a call? Because I know a lot of people say it sounds like nepotism. It's not really. It's not as simple as that. It's actually about the fact that my joke is that, that I always say producers are inherently lazy. Make it easy for them. but it's really the case of humanity, right? It's a very human thing. Whoever's top of mind, who is at the front of my mind, who do I feel like I know, even if I don't know them? And we often hire people that we need to know we can trust somebody a little bit. And even if we don't actually know that person, if they're a little familiar to us, we can feel a little bit more, subconsciously like that's someone that we might be able to trust and like. And so really, put yourself out there as somebody that is at least a name that you've heard of. If I've heard of that person's name before, it's like, oh yeah, Sarah Gibson, that sounds familiar. It can actually put something in me as a hiring manager that makes me think, yeah, okay, let me reach out and see if she's actually up for the job, if she's actually qualified, if she's actually someone I want to hire. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, is to really put yourself out there as much as you can. And I know that's hard for some people who are really introverted, but you don't have to do it by getting on panels. You can do it in a lot of different ways. Like I say, you can have an amazing Instagram. Lots of people get hired based on their Instagrams. You can have an amazing website even. But, you know, definitely one of the easiest things I find is to answer people's questions on forums. You know, that really shows that you're somebody who not only knows what they're talking about, but who is approachable and friendly and generous with their time, and someone that I'd want to be around. I want to be around people like that. That makes a good team player.
I've just been writing notes down of what you're saying, because we often talk about somebody being a good fit, but what we actually mean is just what you said: somebody who's friendly, that we can trust, and that we like. And it's almost as if, oh, can they do the job? That's almost an extra. I know it's not an extra, but it's an interesting balance. I was away many times on sports tournaments, where we were stuck for 8 weeks, 50 of us in small little edit suites. And one of the most important things is, can you get on with all the rest of your colleagues for 8 weeks?
Yeah.
And as well as, can you actually do the technical tasks? So I think that's really important.
And can I piggyback onto that? You know, from a corporate side, and when I'm coaching my managers and when we're doing the hiring practices, what I'm often speaking to my hiring managers about is, you know, look at your teams, look at what you have, and let's look to add to that, not hire for the same. You know, everybody understands diversification when it comes to, you know, your investments. You want to diversify because you want to get some, you know, strength building. You want to make sure that you, if you have any of your portfolio take a dip, you have, you know, some strength to hold it up, or if not, you know, make sure it doesn't, you know. So, but in hiring, it's the same kind of same kind of strategy, where you want to make sure that you have strength in your teams to balance it out, to make sure that you don't have blind spots. So you're adding to your team. So what don't you have that you need to go out and seek? And so you want to go find what you don't have. And so what Katie was saying is, now go look for what you don't have. And so you can go out and do that equitable hiring. And so say, maybe find someone who has something that will add to your team, and then you seek out and you purposefully go out and look for that. And that's where you can go out and look for those people that have uniqueness that could be a good thing for your team.
And that's something that's actually served me in my career. You know, Simon, you commented on the fact that I've done a lot of different things in my career. That was a little bit strategic of me. I started out quite young, so I knew I could. I had the opportunity to have a slower rise up, I suppose. But it served me really well, because it meant that I was always the candidate that had quite a well-rounded background and filled in those gaps. You know, I always wanted to be the person that was a good gap filler. No matter what the team was, I had something that they were looking for. And I think that's something that I specialized in one area while I diversified as well. So I was I like to call myself, I was a jack of all trades and a master of some. And I think that's something that served me really well in my career.
This is a very interesting topic, because it's something that Tony and I were chatting about just yesterday. Dare we risk your microphone?
Hear me now, by the way?
It works! Hooray!
Yay!
Because this, the argument of generalist and specialist often comes up as well, and as we say on many training sessions, what the answer is, it depends. But Tony, could you bracket the answer to this with some of your intro experience, so we can let everyone know really what you do, rather than my poor remembrance of it? But Tony and I were talking about when you go into a job, and Tony's in LA, so you have lots of different kind of aspects of disciplines in LA versus other typical cities, just because of the preponderance of post-production companies there. But the specific thing we were talking about is just what you just mentioned, Katie, the individual skills. And in Tony's case, we were talking about how he had to hide them, because you almost had too many skills depending on the conversation that you were having.
Yes. I would say also there's a difference now, especially the way that things are. I mean, I pivot to live stuff now too. Ironically, I one click of a button and I change the microphone setting, and I'm over here, you know, playing with the XLRs. So if I'm definitely not going out for audio engineer anytime soon. But you know, in a nutshell, I guess, you know, you get as a freelancer, you get the infamous call that came from somebody that knows somebody, and then you get a really fast survey on the other end. Hey, are you available? You're available today? Can you work? And every single thing but the stuff that you need to know. And I think the most important thing is to kind of slow the conversation down and just kind of say, give me a moment, let me get to my calendar, give me an hour, I'll give you a real answer, versus, tripping over yourself, saying yes to a job immediately. You don't get the rate you want, you don't get the position you want, you don't know what the job is, and then before you know it, you're roped into something that doesn't really fit the mold of what your spec for a job is as well, because an interview is supposed to be a two-way conversation. It's a mutual thing. At least this is my opinion. But, I think slow the conversation down and kind of get people to give you the relevant information you need to know as a freelancer, versus tripping over yourself just to say yes to a job that could be a career opportunity. But if you slowed it down, you might have gotten paid more, if that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also an aspect of getting paid as well. And I remember I did 2 decades as freelance, and I always tried to make myself presentable for the next gig with the same client, almost to make sure that they would pay me on the 30 or 60 days or whatever crazy thing that they said to me, including the occasion when they said, well, you'll get paid when we get paid. And it's those, that's crazy times, but it's those sorts of conversations to know how to deal with it. But how do you deal with that, Tony? How do you approach it? Is it just a question of saying, look, I'll get back to you later, or have you got different techniques that you use?
It's what really is the good and bad thing is you are your own business person, and you're the good cop, bad cop, and you have to ask the uncomfortable questions, and it's a matter of how do you get to the uncomfortable question with a smile on your face, or just asking it straight at the very beginning. Rate is never fun to talk about, but if you don't talk about it, you won't get your rate, and you find yourself. I feel like notoriously, you end up in meetings about a job that you haven't gotten paid for yet if you don't ask the questions to slow things down. So I find that the best thing that you can do is just kind of slow and pump the brakes on the other person. And there's another aspect to that is, are you replacing somebody, or are you getting hired from scratch and you're at the starting line with everybody else? Because that's a different type of job. And you should also kind of dig in and do some detective work. If you're replacing somebody on a team, you might want to know what's that environment like, or you might want to know somebody connected to that job, or you do know somebody connected to that job. That's why you got the phone call. So, I think there's several elements to that.
Can I ask you a question, Anthony?
Sure.
What's your and Sarah can probably answer this one as well. What's your take on having a rate card that you can literally just kind of send to someone? Do you think that's a turn off, a turn on? Is it a good thing, a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing if you have something that doesn't. One thing, it's a filter as well. So you send it out to people and you don't hear anything, then you know immediately that's not for you. If they're open, if they're still interested in you, then they'll reach back out and they'll say, listen, this is a little bit above what we usually pay, but this is what we're doing. You're working with a great team, and we're looking. They will still try to hire you. So I think it's a great idea. I mean, I have one, and I think it's a good idea to ship it out to different people and maybe have different rates based on different things you do.
Yeah, I have a couple different rates myself depending on what I'm doing, but there's always the conversation of when you're, I have a repeat client where I have a couple repeat clients, but I gave myself a raise after my first year at freelance. Mm-hmm. So then that was an awkward conversation, but it all went over really well, especially because I track all of my hours for every job, even if it's a day rate or if it's a project rate, because I'm flexible and I'll work with all of those different options. Because a lot of times, the project rates are for the jobs that are real worthy, that I really want to do, and I'll take a little bit of hit on my end just so I can do them because they're fun. Because then I do the other jobs where I get paid a lot more that I don't really want to do, but they pay the bills. It's a meal or a reel kind of a thing. And but I point out hey, remember this project I did and I bid this many hours, but actually it only took me this many hours and it was under. I was significantly under because I'm quick. So it kind of helped justify the, hey, pay me more money because I'm worth it. And, you know, like this isn't going to end up costing you more. Well, maybe a little bit more, but it's about the same, really.
It goes back to the comfort thing. You make them comfortable and they'll pay more. So I think that's a great point.
It also goes, but it's interesting what you were saying about, you know, you take some jobs that are low, that are a lower rate because there's something good for your real. When I talk to people about this, and again, before I was a hiring manager, I always had this, the system that I use is that there is money, career, and happiness, right? And every opportunity has to give you 2 out of those 3 things. So, you know, and it can be any of those 2 things. But as long as there's 2 of those things, it's a good opportunity, right? And which of those 2 things are important changes depending on your life situation. But, you know, is it going to be, you know, good for your career, good money? Is it going to be bad money, but good for your career and make you really happy? Is it going to make you really happy, give you lots of money, but be kind of shit for your career? Like, it's all of those things. You absolutely got those 3 things and you want to have 2 of those 3, and then it's a good opportunity. If there's only 1 of those 3, it's not a good opportunity. And that was always how I weighed up jobs that were offered to me.
I've got a question for you, Sarah, from Donald, actually. And also open for the rest of the panel too, about can we talk about barriers of entry? So moving from one skill set to another. I think you kind of referenced this earlier on, Katie, but Sarah, how do you manage that if you've got a job which is perhaps a different skill set that's come up and you've got an offer, or maybe the job requires you to extend your skill set? How do you approach that?
Well, I love to learn, so I'm always willing to dive in and figure something out. To me, it's like I like puzzles. There's a reason why I watch so much detective fiction, and I now have a Hunt a Killer subscription, because I just love figuring things out and just piecing things together. So for me, like whenever a job is going to offer a fun challenge, that always gets me really excited. And I've never not figured things out. I have been up at midnight crying because my rig isn't working, but I always figure it out. So it's just, you have to have that drive and that hunger to learn and grow, is what I want to say.
Greg sent a nice comment about the nature of just be a great person, and then the rest will gently sort itself out. So I know you said more about that, Greg. There was a couple of sentences, but that's essentially what it comes back to it. And Sarah, how do you manage things if you've got 2 jobs which are overlapping? And can we bring in the dreaded overtime question here? But how do you manage that if it's kind of implied that you will just work beyond the brief to actually finish the job?
Yeah, well, I have conversations when something goes out of scope. Right now, something I'm working on doing is setting up some good boundaries on my day rate, as I have felt the pushing of the boundaries of what I would consider my working hours and what I guess they consider working hours. And I can understand when a job is a rush on their side, but also like when I am just the freelancer, there's also a point where it's like, yes, you paid for my day, but my day is not actually, 13 hours long. Yeah. Or, and like when I am asked to be around, just in case any more last minute changes come in, that, means I'm stuck in front of my computer when I'd rather be walking my dog or making dinner, because I can't just start making dinner and then have to run over back to my computer, which I mean isn't far. I'm in my living room, actually, full disclosure, and my kitchen is just right over there. I have a little 2-bedroom house. And so, I mean, it isn't a huge like jump from one part to the other, but I mean, that risks my dinner getting burnt, and it's just, so then I'm just in the state of limbo, and it's just one of those things that I'm working on setting up boundaries for that. I am not perfect. This is only my 2nd year of freelance, so I'm always learning new things that I need to put in writing and say, hey, these are the working hours. After that, it's more money. I'll shift
Put
to hourly
everything
or
in
whatever.
Yeah, you gotta put everything in writing though. I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like the more you can put in writing, the more that it protects you and puts boundaries around things, and you don't and the uncomfortable conversations are less uncomfortable, right? And that way, instead of going, oh, I actually want to get paid more because I'm doing more hours than I thought I would. If it's already in writing that this is your normal day hours, and outside of that, then the uncomfortable conversation is not so uncomfortable. You just go back to, hey, remember how, remember this was in the contract, so now we're actually getting outside of that. FYI, I'm helping you out here, letting you know that we're getting to that point where it's going to cost you more. Do you really want to do this? Like, it really flips the script on it, and it makes it an uncomfortable conversation. Actually, you helping them out a little bit by saying, hey, you might not want to pay overtime, so why don't we have a discussion about whether or not you need me to stick around? It is a very, very different way of reframing it. If you have that in writing, you can have that more positive reframing.
Or it's wrapped into your rate, and you go by 8, 10, or 12-hour block, and you give a rate for a block of time, and then surpassing that, you have an overtime rate, and that's on your card.
It's a dialogue as well, isn't it? It's having the relationship so you can then be talking about this before the actual deadline happens.
For sure. And I have like a default saying, like if someone asks me to work for the weekend, I just tell them I charge double, because that is the only way it's going to be worth it for me, because I really don't like working on weekends. I need my time.
Yep.
So many times over the years as a freelance, I was thinking weekends and national holidays are for employees and they're just a chance to get stuff done if you're freelance. But no, you're absolutely right. We are fast running out of time. In fact, we're a couple of minutes over. So I just wanted to ask just one last question. Jamie, can I just ask you to comment on this? That as somebody who is in the business of hiring people, what advice would you give for somebody, apart from the some of the things that we've discussed before, which are answering on forums, having a great Instagram, being a lovely person as well, seems to be a theme for this session. But are there any key technical things you can do in your approach, something to look out, things that you've seen that you've guarded people against doing next time?
Well, one of the things that I heard Sarah say that's most important to me is you're never going to be able to demonstrate everything you know on a resume or a reel or whatever, but what you can demonstrate is a willing to learn. And that is a key to every person that I'm looking for, is that they are just going to lean into whatever project or whatever, position they're looking for, because that's all we want. We want someone who's going to dig in. And so if you can demonstrate that to me in an attitude, that's what we want.
Absolutely. And just on that, Jason has just made a comment about something very specific. He says, 3D modeling for TurboSquid. Do you think it's crazy to go full time at it? And I was just about to type, if it's your passion, then absolutely go for it, because that extends exactly what you're saying about learning, because you never know what other doors that's going to open for you. Fantastic. So thank you, everyone. We've kind of scratched the surface of this. So if people have liked it, yes, exactly. Then if people have liked it, then perhaps we'll do this again. But thank you all so much for your wisdom and your experience. This has been very useful. And it's just not just me saying it. We've had many comments in the questions area saying exactly that. So I really appreciate it. So thank you, Katie, Sarah, Jamie, and Anthony. And just can I leave you all with this last little thing? Please have a look at the events page, because we do lots more of these sessions, and some of them are more technical, and some of them branch into more kind of the industry topics. And also people are jumping in here saying, thanks for a useful range of perspectives. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Hannah. So it's been successful. It sounds like people have taken away something that they've learned, which is the whole point of these things. Fantastic. So we'll see you again, everyone. Don't forget to look at the recording on the YouTube Maxon Training Team channel, and have a great rest of your day. And remember, no overtime without pay.
Yes.
Right, take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.